up, I was just like any other kid, just, getting into trouble, having fun, playing. I was a happy kid. And then I was a trusting kid. I trusted everybody and thought everybody was good.
Especially your priest.
Yeah, I was brought up in a Roman Catholic family and very important to my parents. Would sit in as a father figure that were very important in your life. Growing up was, I'd say, upper middle class. We'd go on vacations a lot. Everything was fine up until my father left. He went to Italy. And my mother and sister remained here, and my brothers and I were moved to Sault Ste. Marie. I moved in with my grandmother and my uncle. It was fragmented, our whole family. My father was in Italy, my mother was in Toronto, we were in the Sioux. It was completely, it was a tough time, especially for a kid, right? That's where Father Campbell comes in.
Do you remember roughly the first time you met Father Leo Campbell?
I went early one day and I was just wandering in the gym. He came in. Even at that early hour, you could smell wine on him. There was nobody else around, not a janitor, nobody. And he came to sit next to me, giving me a hug. Don't worry, your parents will be back soon, your father will be back soon. Using my family being away as a way to comfort me.
You feel that you were hunted?
Yes, he was completely aware of my situation. I didn't have any friends. It was a new school. My father wasn't there. He targeted me from the beginning. It was in increments, escalating, taking longer, pulling me closer, putting me on his lap. It was all, looking back, planned. I don't even remember him undoing his pants his penis was out and he did and he put me down on his lap. It's so hard to talk about this stuff, but
how many times did Father Leo Campbell sexually assault and rape you?
Probably 24 and above, so 24 to 30, around there. This happened over a year and a half, 2 years. And when I think about it, smells come back to me and textures. I mean, he taught me to, how to give him a blowjob. I mean, he taught me. I didn't know anything about this. I was a child. He would talk me through it. Peter, you know what? Feels good if you do this. Ejaculate in my mouth. He ejaculated outside my mouth. He'd have a towel or he'd clean it up afterwards. And it progressed. And at the time, I thought this was somebody caring about me. It was something intimate in a strange way.
Does a young Peter Lucci understand what's taken place here?
I knew it was something, it wasn't right, but when it happens as a child, those are the formative years, and you're thrown into chaos. What he did was predatory behavior. It's a thing I can't believe that nobody saw anything. Somebody must have known that this was going on. And yet it just continued and continued until it escalated to the point where he was, raping me.
Can you tell us a little bit about the camping trip?
It was a 3 or 4 day trip with 4 boys and him in the woods. No adult supervision, no nothing, just him and 4 boys. No. It was me and him in a tent. There was another boy, but he was a little bit further to the side. He would come lie next to me on his side. We're spooning. And I couldn't see him from where I was facing that way. He took out his penis, he pulled my pants down and put his penis, near my anus and pushed to get in. And he almost verged on violence, him trying to force himself inside me when it wasn't going. It was painful. He's a grown man, I'm a kid. Pushed until finally something went in. And I don't know how long it lasted. He came and pulled out. I mean, I remember my underwear being all wet and sticky or hard in the morning. And that was that night. Didn't last for very long, but it was traumatic. That was probably the second time that he did that. The second time.
My local priest sexually assaulted and raped me several times. It started by going to his office and him wanting me to masturbate him and to perform oral sex on him. And it ended with vaginal penetration and multiple rapes for the next several months. I initially had met him at I believe it was a youth convention that the diocese put together for all the local parishes, but it was just a very brief exchange. I had saw him briefly, and then I spoke to him more so later in that week after school. I had late practices, so I was there after school as well, and he had came out of his house, kitty corner from the church, and asked if he could look at the book that I was reading. And that was our first real introduction and my first experience of violence with him. He asked me to go in to meet with him briefly to get a book, and asked that I was seated on one of his love seats in the office. So I took a seat, and then he went over to a bookshelf and started looking through books, and I heard the sound of a zipper, but I was immediately embarrassed. I was embarrassed for him. I thought he had accidentally forgot his zipper down or something, and I just remember thinking how embarrassing, I'm just not going to make eye contact, and just looked away. And my attention was brought back to him, and he was already starting to undress himself and touch himself at that point, and was asking me to do the same thing. And I remember saying no, and that this was a sin, and that just being very confused. And I remember the priest collar coming off and being set on the side table next to the love seat that I was sitting on. And I had experienced sexual violence before in my life, so at that point, I think I was in shock, but I knew his intentions were not good. And then he proceeded to force me to have oral sex with him and intercourse at that point. And I just remember I ended up laying on the floor, and I just remember him telling me get yourself together, you gotta go, and just scrambling in shock, and just the smell of and the feeling of his sweat on my body, and just I couldn't get out of there fast enough, but I couldn't move. It was the weirdest combination. It's very hard to explain. And then just running to the school and getting in trouble because I was late and somebody had to do my lines, and but just the utter shock. It was I instantly lost my voice. I was instantly silent. I think I was so afraid of him. It's clearly no wasn't enough, and like I said, this man was making threats against my life. All I knew is that he was fully capable of following through with it. He was already seriously injuring me. I had no other evidence to suggest otherwise, to suggest that he wouldn't hurt me or that he wouldn't go after one of my family members. I think when I spoke initially, my main concern was to make it stop in some way, and I was nervous that he was going to come back to hurt me and to hurt other people. I remember feeling really just like a pile after like the first time I spoke. You know, it was for a purpose and a good purpose, but I was a child, and it was an unbelievable weight to have. And even after I told, you know, there is a sense of relief that the proper authorities know that you did your part, but then it's there, it's real. Like, it's more real than before almost, once people start knowing about it. So it was very hard as a child to try to understand all of those feelings and process everything that was going on.
Beginning in 5th grade, my priest, my religion teacher, my Pee Wee basketball coach was Father George Gaharchik, a well-loved young priest in our community who had been grooming me for years of getting used to him handling me physically, touching me, having him close to me. And in the 5th grade, that touching progressed to sexual assault. George Gaharchik, to this day, I believe he must have, my belief is that he has a personal infatuation with male genitalia. I believe from the patterns and the things that he did throughout the 3 years, I believe he was testing us to see, he wanted to know the exact day that we were going to be sexually mature, in my opinion. And that progressed to one-time digital penetration in a shower when I was 13. I did not like that experience at all, and I gave him a look in the shower, and surprisingly, it ended for me that day in the shower. Unfortunately, for some of my friends, it continued for them.
You mentioned earlier, and forgive me for asking, what exactly digital penetration is?
He stuck his finger in my anus in the shower when I was 13 years old.
Why the diocese kept shuffling pedophile priest Paul-Andre Harvey from church to church.
This is me, and it was in the same time. Yeah, in 5th grade. I was always at the church every Sunday with him because I was helping him with the Mass. So probably he thought I was a good victim for him, I don't know.
In 1978, Hélène Ash remembers Father Harvey would come to her home every week to have coffee with her parents. He had been transferred to her town, his 3rd parish in 2 years.
Most of the sexual assaults took place in the victims' homes. When I knew the parents would be out, I would show up unexpectedly.
So we were all alone. And he asked me, do you want to sit on my lap? Okay, I'm 10, so he's a good guy, and we know him. So I went on his lap. And then, okay, he hugged me. And I felt uncomfortable, but still. But then I felt his mouth going through my neck. I remember it like it was yesterday. And I felt his hands going down. I said to myself, my gosh, what's happening? It was eternal for me. And then the phone rang. It was my mom. So I took the phone. I was, oh gosh. And my mom said, are you okay? I said, no, Mom, come back. It's not okay. And as soon as I hung up the phone, I ran to the bathroom and locked myself in. My mom told me that when she and my father came back, he wasn't there.
As parish priest, Father Harvey was also the priest at Hélène's school.
So the next morning, I went to the principal of my school and told her everything. And then the first thing I knew, he was not working there anymore.
Helen McGonigal was just 6 when she was first abused by Father Brendan Smith.
So there's nobody in the classroom but me and Smith. In that classroom, that's when he pulled up my skirt. He had his hand, he put his hand in my underwear, and he told me his finger was the finger of God, and he penetrated me with his finger.
Father Brendan Smith was sent to Providence, Rhode Island in the United States in 1965. The church didn't bother to tell parishioners about Father Brendan Smith's past as a child rapist. However, it didn't take their children long to find out.
I was taken into an area that seemed like it was in the basement of the church, and into a room that had maybe boxes or file cabinet. And in that room, I was abused by him there. There was a chair there. I was alone in that room with him, and he had his fingers in my underwear again, but he also had me perform fellatio.
Just put his name out there. The truth is all I want.
After years of anguish and pain comes a passionate plea aimed straight at Cardinal Daniel DiNardo, the leader of Catholic America.
Just say I'm not a liar. It was real, it happened, and he was the one that did it. He did do it.
He, accusers say, is Father Lawrence Peguero, a priest at Our Lady of St. John in the 60s and 70s who would often stop by their home for breakfast.
Your mother's cooking the priest a meal in the kitchen.
Yes, and there's a curtain in between that's closed.
On the other side of that curtain, Monica Dianabaya says, is where the priest raped her for years.
I would struggle and fight, but he's praying out loud. So my mother is hearing the praying out loud.
Her older sister, Elodia Flores,
he was my monster.
Remembers it happened weekly.
He would get me, put me on his lap. Oh, let's ride the horse, you know. And the whole time he was just dripping with sweat.
And along with the sexual abuse, they say, would come threats if they ever told Mom or Dad.
I could kill your mother or your father. Do you ever want to see them again?
The same thing, I'm going to kill them. I'm going to kill your baby sisters. I mean, it was, what are you supposed to do?
Monica would pray, but not the Lord's Prayer.
I would beg God to let me die. Please let me die, because I don't want him to do this to me anymore.
Both sisters buried the abuse for years. After Father Peguero died in 2000, their other siblings said the priests abused them too. In 2008, the family went to the Archdiocese to sit down with Cardinal DiNardo. They were hoping for an apology.
Instead, he walked in, put his hand out, wanted us to kiss his ring, which I refused. I told him no.
Cardinal DiNardo wanted you to kiss his ring?
His ring, yes.
They say as they poured their hearts out to the Cardinal,
all he did was say, I've never heard of that. He was never in trouble for anything like that.
Through a spokesperson, Cardinal DiNardo says he absolutely did not require or suggest that his ring be kissed, adding that he recalls apologizing no fewer than 3 times.
If Cardinal DiNardo says, I did apologize to that family.
No, you did not. Not even a, I'm sorry this happened to y'all, or I'm sorry to hear that happened to y'all. Nothing. It was humiliating. That's really what it was. It was very humiliating.
As for the family's sexual abuse claims, it sued the Archdiocese in 2010 and ultimately settled the case out of court.
There's no price that they could ever give anyone for what they took away from you. Your innocence, your childhood. I mean, they took your soul.
They can only hope now that the church will finally acknowledge publicly that their childhood parish priest is on the forthcoming list of clergy credibly accused.
I want his name to be on there. I want the truth be known. What was done in darkness come to light. That's all I want.
These parents, whom we'll call Gary and Elizabeth, have asked us not to identify them or their daughters. Over a 6-year period, 2 of their 3 girls were sexually abused by their local priest, Father Kevin O'Donnell. The abuse began in 1987, but church officials received their first complaint about O'Donnell as far back as 1958. At the time of their daughter's abuse, the auxiliary bishop was George Pell.
I mean, it's his duty to know, isn't it? He was a very senior part of the hierarchy of the Catholic Church. He was the bishop for the area in which we reside. He should have known.
The 2 girls were each 5 years old when the abuse started. In the years since, the eldest has attempted suicide several times. The very night before our interview with her parents, she attempted an overdose. Her sister, according to the parents, started drinking to numb the pain, wandered in front of a car, and is now confined to a wheelchair.
Is there any doubt in your mind that there's a direct connection between the abuse your daughters suffered and their present state? Absolutely not. It's a direct connection. There's no doubt.
Gary and Elizabeth applied for compensation through the commission established by Pell. For the eldest daughter, they were offered $50,000. In this letter from George Pell's lawyers, they were told the compensation offered provided a realistic alternative to litigation that will otherwise be strenuously defended.
$50,000 for a destroyed daughter's life? Absolutely. Was that reasonable? I don't believe so. So their position was that no matter what had been done to your daughter, $50,000 was the ceiling? That's right, even if she'd been abused by 10 priests. Have you signed on the bottom line? Our daughter hasn't, no.
David Ridsdale grew up in Ballarat in country Victoria. He'd been born into a strong Catholic family. He was one of 9 children. His uncle, Gerald Ridsdale, was a priest.
When I grew up, he was always like the shining light, and certainly for my grandmother, he was the pinnacle of her Catholic achievement, I guess. He started to hang around more when I reached around the age of 11. He started to turn up, and my mum was pregnant with my youngest sister, and he started to offer to assist by looking after me for weekends or taking me away.
Father Gerald was hanging around because he was a pedophile. Father Gerald began assaulting David when David was 11, and the abuse lasted till he was 15.
What forms did the assaults take? They were always masturbation of you?
No. Initially it was masturbation, and it was kissing, and then oral sex, both. And I remember the first time we were in the bush somewhere, and he tried to make me perform oral sex, and I remember I was gagging and stuff, and he would get angry if I couldn't perform the way he wanted, and he took me for driving lessons. That was the key. Did you want to learn to drive? Let me drive a car in a paddock, and I'm sure any 11-year-old will tell you that's a pretty exciting thing.
Sick as it may sound, the abuse would sometimes occur when priest was driving altar boy to the next town to say Mass.
Both as a man as a priest, he knew it was wrong.
And what would be his demeanour?
At the time, a total blank. It was, it was no words, no anything. It was an action, and then it would finish, and he would just drive on as if nothing had happened. And then we'd.
You mean that he'd then start the car?
He'd start the car and go straight to the church and say Mass. And there.
I mean, it's hard to imagine.
Well, it's hard to forget.
He was probably the most notorious pedophile. He was shifted from parish to parish. Whenever the church authorities were told of what he was up to, they seemed to just ignore it and send him on his merry way to another parish and not warn the parishioners.
I was kind of a happy child. I was an artist. I went to a Catholic grammar school. I got straight A's for 8 years.
When did that start to change?
We were going to play pool, and the priest, who's the vice principal, he sat down at the bench, and he said, "You shoot." And I said, "Okay," and I shot the ball. And I turned around and told him, "It's your turn." And I looked at him, and he was sitting there masturbating. And I remember I turned all red, I started sweating, the hair on my neck was standing up, and I just stood there frozen. I didn't know what to do. And he said, "Keep playing now, I want to watch you." And then I turned around, and the head of the boys' club, Brother Sal, was watching this, and he just stood there watching. He did nothing.
Joey Piscatelli drew to cope with the abuse, his pictures becoming more vivid and violent, mirroring the nightmare he was living, a nightmare that only got worse.
This went on for about a year and a half, and then one day he cornered me on the stairs and started molesting me and told me to get upstairs to the all-purpose room on the third floor of the school. And he dragged me into the room and attacked me, and I was raped, and I passed out and blacked out while that happened, and I just totally lost sense of what happened after he started attacking me. When I got home, well, I don't even know how I got home, but when I got home, I had blood in my underwear. So I went in the backyard of my house, and I wrapped the bloody underwear around a rock and threw it over the fence into the field to get rid of the evidence or whatever. It was so disgusting, and I knew I had been raped.
According to Piscatelli, he was threatened when he reported it to a staff member.
The principal of the school, Father Bernard DeBenny, who's now a convicted molester, told me that he was going to kick me out of school and fire my mother from the cafeteria because I have a big mouth.
This family went through hell, their lives ravaged by their trusted family priest, who betrayed them in the most depraved way imaginable, stealing the innocence of 5 of their beloved daughters, all while masquerading as a man of God. It was early 1980 when Father Gus Gella suddenly packed up and left his parish in New Jersey. He headed to a new church in Pennsylvania. The Fortney family warmly welcomed the new priest into their home. He came for dinners, gave the kids gifts, asked the children to come to the rectory and help them count the Sunday collection. The sisters say he began to groom them under the guise of what he called education. The family says the abuse began to happen in the rectory, in their home, on family trips, virtually everywhere they went together. For Patty, it started when she was 13, continued until she was 15. Laura was 10 years old, and it went on until she was 14. Teresa was just 8. She went through this for 4 long years. Marissa was only 7, and it stopped when she turned 10. Carolyn was just a toddler. She was 2 years old. He didn't stop until she was 12, and only then, because that's when his story blew up in his face. While we do not know the full extent of what they suffered, a recent grand jury report says he admitted to fondling the girls. Investigators then found he had regularly collected samples of their urine, pubic hair, and blood. Tragically, the grand jury also discovered, now in an all too familiar tale, that the church knew about Gus Gella. In 1987, a local teacher got a complaint that Gella was doing, quote, wrong things with children, asking to follow them into the bathroom. The teacher reported them to the principal, who immediately reported it to the diocese, where it went nowhere. Another note addressed to then Bishop and later Cardinal William Keeler mentioned concerns about Gella, but neither did anything. Although he voluntarily retired in 1988, he was still an active predator, according to his victims. And in 1992, some of the Fortneys were at Gella's beach house when the unthinkable happened. A young niece found a box of photos in the house. Inside were pictures of naked young girls. One of them was Carolyn Fortney. Father Jella was confronted and questioned by a Father Hellwig. Jella told Hellwig it had started in the bath and that it had progressed from there. He said he imagined the family would be sore at him and he would agree not to contact them. Father Hellwig told Mrs. Fortney, "You can relax. Father said that Redacted just took his intentions toward her wrong, that he loved her and he would never hurt her." That is when Jella was arrested. But he died before his trial.
Priests have been and are right now having illegal sex with minors. The fact it wasn't taken seriously could be based in the unique sexual culture of the Church, the vows of celibacy that are themselves now not believed. The lie of celibacy has, he says, been something of an open secret.
Heterosexual activity among priests is kind of winked at. If it doesn't make a scandal, if it doesn't make a baby, if it doesn't make some waves. But, you know, kind of who cares? Boys will be boys, men will be men.
The Boston Globe agrees.
What appears to be the case is that within the church there has been a lot of winking about sexual activity, even of the consenting adult type, for, dare we say this, centuries. And that when a problem got too hot, when it involved children, they would move the offending priest along.
I said in 1991 that the sexual abuse of minors is the tip of the iceberg of sexual activity of priests. The reason it is because the legal system and now the media also is not afraid to tackle that very difficult problem. But I said if you follow that to its foundation, it's going to lead you to the highest corridors of the Vatican. And I believe that.
You mean the highest corridors of the Vatican practicing unlawful sex with minors?
And having sexual lives, non-celibate activity.
The people of Boston were angry. Cardinal Law shielded 220 pedophile priests for 18 years, during which time they raped and abused 1,000 children.
I was just enraged, and I had this sense that I wanted to confront Cardinal Law. And it was so naive because this man already knew of at least 200 Boston priests who had abused children. Nothing I could say was going to shame him.
I think also the severity of the abuse is something that I couldn't have even imagined until I began working on this. This isn't a matter of children being hugged inappropriately or touched inappropriately. These are situations in which a boy will be anally raped and go back through the streets from the rectory to his own home with blood in his trousers.
The second crisis is the widespread and massive cover-up of child sex crimes by Catholic bishops. They knowingly concealed child predators. They knowingly gave sanctuary to child rapists in the Catholic Church and put more children in harm's way, knowing that this priest would go on to rape and abuse again.